Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my House of the Dragon video all about the dragon dreams that characters have had on the show and dragon dreams from later in the timeline during the events of Game of Thrones. There have been at least 5 different members of the House Targaryen that we know of so far that have had really important dragon dreams. In the next several years, we'll probably learn about several more once they do later parts of the timeline, earlier parts of the timeline with other members of their family. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the House of the Dragon episodes just like I did for the main series. Be sure to subscribe to get them. But dragon dreams are basically visions of the future that are specific to people of Valyrian descent. We mostly just hear about them from the Targaryen family, but that doesn't mean that they're the only family from ancient Valyria that had them. And there are other characters that we know of who have visions of the future using other methods, like Bran is a Greenseer before he became the Three-Eyed Raven. Greenseers can see through time using the weirwoods. Also, because of the way Bran Stark's powers work now as the Three-Eyed Raven, I know a lot of you will ask, are dragon dreams really just Bran Stark using his powers to try and travel back in time and warn previous Targaryen kings and other people in their family about the coming of the Long Night? That would be funny, like this is all just Bran Stark secretly trying to warn everyone in the past. But I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think that he tries to mess with the past after he finds out about how he messed up Hodor. But later in the timeline, because of all the wars, the infighting, rebellions in their family across Westeros, things like Robert's Rebellion, most of the ancient information that the Targaryens had about their Valyrian-specific powers granted to members of their bloodline were lost. Like eventually Samwell starts learning about some of these things because of documents in the Citadel. We also learned that's how Rhaegar learned about the prophecy too. So like at some point during the timeline, all this important knowledge is lost. Along with a lot of the ancient Valyrian secrets, the really important stuff like how to create new Valyrian steel, Valyrian pyromancers, and how the Valyrian blood mages created dragon bonding, because there's still lots of dragon eggs that could potentially hatch later in the timeline. So if you knew how that magic worked, you could create a whole new line of dragon riders that were not Targaryens. But what happened is that much later, new dragon dreamers were probably born to their family across the timeline without really understanding their abilities or what the dreams meant. Like the same thing happens to all the Stark children in present day. During Game of Thrones, all the Stark children are born with the ability to warrior, but Bran is the only one who actually learns how it works and practices it, develops it. That's what they mean when they say the Stark children have wolf dreams. Like Jon Snow still has wolf dreams. All the Stark children who still have direwolves that are still alive have wolf dreams. It's basically them warging into their direwolves at night without understanding what it means. Because they're doing that Jon Snow sequel series, maybe we'll see some wolf dreams from Jon Snow on that. But dragon dreams, dragon dreamers are basically prophets in the Targaryen family who see visions of the future. They're like human spoilers. Here's what's going to happen in the future, but none of them really understand what the dreams mean exactly. Most of them misinterpret them, and most of the dreams wind up having tragic payoffs. So I'll do all these dragon dreams in chronological order. The first one we know of is from Daenys the Dreamer in ancient Valyria. She's the daughter of Rhaenyra Targaryen about 100 years before the birth of Aegon the Conqueror. While the Targaryen family was still living in the Valyrian freehold, Daenys, one of Rhaenyra's children, had a vision of the doom of Valyria. Her father took all the family's holdings, all their current dragons, which included a young version of Balerion the Black Dread. He sits here on Viserys' model. I think these are meant to represent the different houses of all the dragon lords, like the specific houses that they lived in inside the freehold. He sold their entire family to a small trading outpost that they had established many years prior called Dragonstone. It was still just a trading post at that time. Its construction was meant to be a copy of the freehold with the Anagrion here. That's the place where the ancient Valyrian blood mages created dragon bonding and practiced their arts. The Valyrians, which are also of Valyrian descent, established Driftmark, which is the island right next to it, long before the Targaryens came to Westeros. So technically the Valyrians came to Westeros first, but they weren't dragon lords, so they were like way less influential, way less powerful within the freehold. In the freehold, Valyrians didn't have a king or queen. They were ruled by a democratic council, like a house of lords, a house of dragon lords. Make all the jokes you want. As the title implies, only the dragon lords had right to sit on the council and make decisions. We don't know what the exact text of her dragon dream was, like what she actually spoke, but at some point in a flashback in some future show like an Aegon the Conqueror series that HBO said that they're doing, or an Ancient Valyrian Freehold series, we'll see her in a flashback speak the dragon dream. Many volcanoes exploding all at the same time. We should move to our summer home on Dragonstone. And even though Daenys is the oldest dragon dreamer in their family we know about, she's only the oldest recorded dragon dreamer, so there were probably other members of their family previously who had dragon dreams and they just didn't record them. About 100 years after the family had inhabited Dragonstone, Aegon the Conqueror was born as the next recorded member of their family to have dragon dreams. There were probably others that popped up, but he's the next one that we know about. The difference is that Aegon the Conqueror kept his dragon dreams secret, or he only told his sisters or just like a couple people. And that's why we're only just learning that he had them on House of the Dragon, because a lot of the events were recorded by maesters who weren't actually privy to the actual events, so they didn't have the entire truth. And because we've also learned that dragon dreamers have many, many dragon dreams, like it's not like a one-time only kind of thing. They just have continual dragon dreams, and you only hear them speaking about some of them. Aegon also probably had other dragon dreams, but we just learned about the most important one that he had, which is basically about the Long Night, and it is the prophecy of the prince who was promised that they talked about on the main show. Aegon himself called it A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the title of George R.R. Martin's novel series adapted for the main show. His dream was basically that eventually the White Walkers and the Night King would cover the world in ice and one of his descendants would stop it. But, like they say, most people misinterpreted their dragon dreams and none of them ever understood when they would actually be paid off or come to pass. So for instance, all the kings after him that knew the prophecy just assumed that it would happen at any given moment. Aegon wound up having the prophecy etched on the Valyrian dagger that the family had brought with them from ancient Valyria, using Valyrian pyromancer techniques which were eventually lost. The Valyrian pyromancers probably morphed into the Pyromancers Guild, who created wildfire later in the timeline. Like I said, a lot of their Valyrian knowledge was probably lost over time. Everyone later in the timeline we see wielding the dagger doesn't know about the prophecy. Bran could probably use his three-eyed raven powers to learn about the prophecy, but he's kind of like the totality of the internet, all knowledge on the internet without a search function. He doesn't really understand the context of everything he sees. It's all just like random information all bunched together for him. After Aegon the Conqueror, the next dragon dreamer that we know about, at least right now, is Viserys I, who's still alive on the show, much to his chagrin, like he probably thought that he was going to die a long time before this. The only dragon dream specific to him that he actually had was different from other dragon dreams, at least that he revealed on the show, was his vision of what he thought was his future heir sitting on the Iron Throne being crowned king and all the dragons roaring as one. But like Daenerys later misinterpreting what her visions meant, Viserys mistakenly thought that he was seeing his son Baelon with Aemma, who she was pregnant with at the time, on the Iron Throne, when in fact his dragon dream was probably about Aegon II being crowned the next king, and the roaring of all the dragons that he was seeing was either happening during the actual Dance of the Dragons, when the Greens and the Blacks dragons are all fighting each other, or possibly even more tragic was him seeing the storming of the dragon pit when the commoners in King's Landing eventually sacked the dragon pit and killed all the dragons that were trapped inside at the time. So his dragon dream, like most of the dragon dreams, were meant to be tragic ones. Like it was him seeing that eventually he'd have another wife because the love of his life had died and his son was only crowned because of a mistake leading to the civil war that nearly destroyed their entire house. So the big idea here is that dragon dreams aren't meant to be good things. Usually it's something really, really bad that they're foreseeing. For instance, the doom of Valyria. Very, very bad. After Viserys, we just learned that Helaena Targaryen has dragon dreams, his daughter with Alicent. We've never seen Viserys have any scenes with her talking about the dragon dreams, but they kind of imply that they have very similar personalities, like they're both kind of geeks. She really likes collecting her bugs. Viserys really just likes making his models here, playing with his toy model, reading about ancient history. So they kind of imply that of all of his children with Alicent, she's the one that he favored most, because she's standing like right next to him at the funeral here, and that's usually reserved for whoever the king liked most. We'll call the Viserys and the Helaena scenes deleted scenes, like just scenes of them geeking out over his model of ancient Valyria, talking about the dragon dreams that both of them have had. So far, Helaena has had 4 different dragon dreams that we know about. She's spoken about them on 2 separate occasions. She'll probably have more later on. But during both times, she speaks in a string of consciousness kind of way, like a true prophet would. So it sounds like one dream, but she's really speaking about several different events, all just kind of bunched together. The same way that Bran might talk about events that he's seeing with his three-eyed raven powers. The first time she says the last ring will have no legs, that's about Aegon II's future, and like all of her dreams, they're tragic and paid off in ironic ways. Another thing to note too, all of Alicent's children have scenes when they're born that foreshadow the methods of their deaths, which they'll pay off in ironic ways on the show eventually. That's just the writer's dark sense of humor, a very Game of Thrones thing to do, foreshadowing their deaths during their first scenes. I'll wait to talk more about the dragon dream for Aegon II till they actually pay it off, because it might not happen till a future season. Her second dragon dream is about Aemond Targaryen. She says he'll have to close an eye, and it was a reference to Alicent saying he'd 100% for sure claim a dragon someday, which he did in Vhagar soon after this, but he gets his eye cut out. Her third one, Hand Turns Loom, Spool of Green, Spool of Black, Dragons of Flesh, Weaving Dragons of Thread, is actually 2 different dreams, but they're both about the Dance of the Dragons itself. Hand Turns Loom is a reference to Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, influencing the Dance of the Dragons, the people that fought in the Dance of the Dragons. Like, he's directly responsible for part of it getting started. He influences the king. He also influences his daughter Alicent, who's leader of the Greens. He kind of fosters her mistrust of Rhaenyra. The loom in the Dragons of Thread, Weaving Dragons of Flesh, is a reference to Rhaenyra and Alicent's black and green gowns that they wear, which the Maesters later used to refer to the Dance of the Dragons as the Blacks versus the Greens. And the Dragons of Flesh that they weave are the new children in their family that they give birth to, who become the main fighters in the dance, the dragon riders on both sides of the conflict. They'll be introducing even more children on the show. Like, even though we're having a time jump, so we have a bunch of the kids that we previously saw being older, there'll also be new children coming along in next week's episode and in future seasons. And all of them are born as dragon riders. So we'll see 17 different dragons on the show eventually. And what'll probably happen with Helaena is we'll see her have even more dragon dreams as long as she's part of the show. Like, there's another time jump in episode 8, older Helaena Targaryen would still be having new dragon dreams. That's kind of like her thing on the show. She's like a living spoiler, telling them about what's eventually going to happen, but at least when she's speaking them on the show, none of the other characters really understand what she's talking about. They just think that it's all gibberish. The next recorded dragon dreams in their family are from Daenerys Targaryen on the main show, and those are visions that she has in the House of the Undying. It's possible that she had other dragon dreams and just didn't speak about them. Daenerys is also named for the original Daenys the Dreamer, thus the connection with them both having dragon dreams. And also, like Daenys, like all the other Targaryens that have dragon dreams, all of Daenerys' dreams are meant to have tragic ends. In the House of the Undying, her visions start with the Iron Throne Room covered in what she thinks is snow, and she misinterprets this, thinking that she'll eventually retake the Red Keep in Westeros. But all this stuff falling around her actually winds up being the ash from her sacking King's Landing. Then she has a vision of herself touching the Iron Throne, and she mistakenly thinks that it's her sitting on the Iron Throne eventually, like, oh, I'll eventually win it and I'll become the next ruler of Westeros like my ancestors before me. When in fact, tragically, it's actually about her death, like she saw a vision of her death. Because after this, she sees a more literal vision of the Long Night, like Aegon did when she passes beyond the wall. That was a reference to the events of the Season 7 finale with the Night King destroying the wall with Viserion. And the one she sees right after this of Khal Drogo with her baby Rhaego that she had with him was her seeing her actual death. Like the vision was her meeting them again in death. We'll be together, but it'll happen because she's dead. And that's meant to be connected to her visions from the Iron Throne Room in the Iron Throne itself. Like I said though, this is only the beginning. We'll get more dragon dreams from Helaena, and also when they cover different periods of the timeline like the Blackfire Rebellion with different characters, Aegon's Conquest with Aegon himself, other characters, Ancient Valyria with other characters. We'll probably see other members of their family who also had dragon dreams, which will connect the different shows across the timeline. If there's any other dragon dreams that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, or any questions you have about the actual dragon dreams, just write them in the comments. In my full episode 8 video, we'll post Sunday night after they release it. Everyone click here for my House of the Dragon episode 8 video. I'll be sure to update the link as soon as I post that, and click here for all my other House of the Dragon videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.